right, we should be live.
Okay, thank you. And should we wait a second for Commissioner McGrath? Looks like they're still trying to connect.
Does look that way. We only thought we were ready. That was a trick.
I know, right? Okay, it looks like they have signed on. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order a meeting of the City of Oregon City Commission in a joint work session with the City of Westland Council for Thursday, September 30th, 2021 at 6 p.m. This is a virtual meeting. And I'm going to ask our recorder to go ahead and call the roll, please.
So Councillor Todd Jones will be arriving late for this meeting. Councillor Mary Baumgartner.
Present.
Councillor Rory Bielostowski.
Present.
Council President Bill Relier.
Present.
And Mayor Jules Walters.
Present.
And for the City of Oregon City, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Here.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments this evening?
I didn't receive any.
Okay, there are no citizen comments. So then we will go ahead on to our introductory items, which is council and commission introductions, although we've called the roll.
We did receive one by email.
Yes. Yes, I was going to make that correction. We did receive 2 by email, but there was nobody registered for public testimony tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. And does the commission generally read those into the record, or you just note that they were received by email?
We just note that they were received.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and move on to our staff and consultant introductions, and then move into the work session overview. So I do not know who's the lead on this, but I will hand it over perhaps to John.
Yes,
correct?
thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody from Oregon City and Westland. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share this event. I know it's a Thursday night, which is unusual for us for sure. So thank you very much for your time. Tonight, we're talking about the Oregon City Westland Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge Concept Plan. There's a lot of effort that's gone into this. I was just looking at the project team. It's extensive. So Mark Batorik is here tonight to facilitate the conversation. But really, the project team, this is an opportunity to review the findings and preferred recommendation from the advisory committee and the project management team. And really, we're hoping to open discussion between Westland and Oregon City. The effort to date has been excellent from my perspective. We've seen it well on our side. I assume Westland has seen the study on their side, but trying to figure out how to help staff move forward with an adoption of the plan is kind of what we're hoping for. So with that, I'm turning it, I think the right step is to move it over to Mark Batorik, if that's your pleasure, Mayor.
Yes, please take it away, Mark.
Great. Well, good evening, mayors and commission and council. Mark Batorik with Kittleson and Associates. Tonight, Nick Gross with Kittleson will be running the slides again. And then we have Sandra Hikari from ODOT. And I think Lucinda is back from ODOT as well. And Eric will be joining us from the city of Westland, and then Dana Webb from Oregon City, who are involved throughout this project, along with our partners at Clackamas County and Metro. So I'll pop up the slides. And the good thing tonight versus Tuesday night, Tuesday we had 76 slides. Tonight we only have 23 slides, so less slides and probably a little bit more discussion on this going forward. But let's go to the next slide. I'll just give an overview of our agenda. We're going to provide a little background of the work to date. I know we've done briefings with both the council and commission back in the early part of summer. We wanted to take the summer a little bit, and one of the things the promise was to have an update on all the items which you guys got on Tuesday. A lot of things were moving through the summer and vacations and everything. So we wanted to get that in front of both the councils and commission to have full context coming into this. So tonight we'll provide, again, kind of an overview and background of the concept plan and the findings and recommendations from that. And then the steps going forward to realize the actual construction of a future bridge. And the first step of that is local adoption, and that's starting with the two cities here tonight. And if we can get beyond that, we'll lay out kind of the course that goes beyond that. But as I mentioned, I think on Tuesday, if one city is not ready to go forward, it's hard to move forward since a bridge keys and two transportation system plans to that. So Nick and I'll provide this overview, and then plan is to open it up for Q&A and discussions, and then a little bit of dialogue might be good for Commissioner McGriff and Councilor Baumgartner to provide their perspectives as they were your liaisons throughout the process. And then we want to just get feedback. And as John mentioned, questions and willingness to move forward into an adoption process. And then we'll talk a little bit, if we do go forward into an adoption process, what that would look like, both the notice period, since this would be amendments to both cities' transportation system plans independently. There's a notice to the Department of Land Conservation and Development that kind of would kick things off. Then your typical legislative adoption process, ultimately ending with the City Council and City Commission hearings. So we'll just brief the two groups on that. So that's where we're headed. And with that, I'll go to next slide to kind of connect Tuesday to today. And Tuesday, we talked about a lot of different projects and a lot of investments that had been in the works and are starting to be implemented by both cities. On the Westland side, we talked about the Highway 43 bike and ped improvement and the concept plan, starting on the north and starting to work down to that. The ped and bike improvements in and around the I-205 interchange at Highway 43. Eric provided you an update with the Willamette Falls Drive ped and bike plan. And then we also talked about the pedestrian path project that Westland has, as you see in orange. And then on the Oregon City side, Dana provided the update on the Oregon 99 shared use path, kind of connecting the multi-use path down and around the corner. And then I know Commissioner Smith and ODOT discussed the Main Street sidewalks connections. So a lot of multi-use connections, but they all bring us to the Arch Bridge and the deficiencies we have there from a bike and pedestrian standpoint. And while we're celebrating the 100th year of that, that is a piece of the puzzle that still remains. And that was really the purpose for the concept planning work that has occurred over the last year roughly. And over on the right side of the screen, I think many of you picked up on this. Also, the Arch Bridge represents really the only multimodal crossing for pedestrians and bicycles between Sellwood and then the Canby Ferry. As many know, the Canby Ferry is not as reliant as on times. So this is really that sole connection. And we have a lot of investments going through there that we heard about on Tuesday. So tonight we'll talk about the plan and the concept and where that started and ended and where the next steps are for that. So let's see, next slide. So many of you have been involved. We started this process back about a year ago, and there's been ongoing public outreach and engagement throughout that process. Briefings with both City Council and City Commission. We developed a purpose and need and evaluation criteria, had advisory committees that met throughout that. And then did an analytical analysis of various crossings, started with a few, ended up going to, I believe, about 15, and then narrowing back and going through a scoping process, and then a final concept plan that came to fruition in late June. And now the next step to move that forward, if there's the desire amongst the two committees, is the adoption process, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to turn it over to Nick Gross, the man behind the scenes. You'll hear from him tonight, and he's going to give a quick overview. A lot of this probably is not new to this group, but just while we've been off for summer, refresh everybody of a little bit of the history, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about next steps and then open it up for discussion. So Nick, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And good evening, councilors and commissioners. So I'll be presenting at a high level the key findings and summary of the Oregon City Westland Ped Bike concept plan tonight. And I'll be starting about a year ago. As Mark mentioned, we've been at this for about a year. Early on in the project process, we developed this purpose and need statement. This was a statement that we revisited many times and referred to at key decision points in the project process, and I'll quickly read it for you all. The purpose of the concept plan is to identify and select a preferred bridge alignment for people walking, biking, and rolling across the Willamette River to connect the communities of Oregon City and Westland, enhance safety, and improve regional connectivity. So this was a statement, again, that we worked very closely with. We wordsmithed quite a bit here. And ultimately, it was developed, refined, and accepted by the key groups that influence the project, those being the Project Advisory Committee, the PAC, the Project Leadership Team, the PLT, the Project Management Team, which is the PMT, and the general public. The project team also initiated consultation with 6 federally recognized tribes. Those are the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Siletz, Warm Springs, Umatilla, Nez Perce, and Yakima. And all of these tribes participated in at least one meeting with the project. Early in the project process, there were government to government consultations initiated between FHWA, ODOT, and these tribes. And it's worth noting most of the government to government consultation occurs during what is called a NEPA phase or a Section 106 phase. And that the majority of the consultation to date focused on the potential impacts to the cultural resources in the areas. Through all of this consultation, 2 key themes emerged. The first is that the Willamette Falls and the vicinity within the area of the falls is an extremely significant, culturally and historically significant place, both throughout history and contemporary uses today. Can't really emphasize that enough at how important and culturally significant the falls area and its vicinity is. Along with that, of course, is the protection of the cultural resources that are there today and the history that this place has. On the public side, there was an extensive public outreach campaign. We conducted stakeholder interviews with a number of agencies that are shown here with their logos and icons. Everyone from Clackamas County to Downtown Association of Oregon City, PGE, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, etc. We also conducted several focus group meetings. These were specifically targeted at engaging groups that may have been missed in the general stakeholder process or the general public process. This also had a specific lens towards the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework. So thinking of engaging our Spanish-speaking audience, youth and seniors, as well as shoreline property owners along the Willamette River. The project conducted a public survey that engaged over 780 people and residents from Westland and Oregon City. The overwhelming response from the public survey was a strong support. Over 80% of folks supported a pedestrian and bicycle bridge in this area. And the majority of people who responded to the survey noted that if a new bridge was built, that they would use it for walking. That's the 70% you see on the right side of your screen there. This graphic here is a snippet pulled right out of the concept plan. We pulled verbatim comments and quotes that we got on the plan. I'll read off a couple here. So again, these are quotes directly from the community. The first, we must give people healthier and safer options to cross the river. Our future depends on it. Because it will be safer, more people will want to cross the bridge and it will allow the communities to come together. The Arch Bridge is a historic bridge and Oregon City and Westland are historic cities. Do not take our historic history. We need to provide a safe, calm, and enjoyable experience for both people with disabilities and children on small bikes. And lastly, the current Arch Bridge connection is dangerous and not sized for the amount of people in the area. A better connection benefits all communities in the area and encourages more active lifestyle choices. So now pivoting a bit more to our technical evaluation and approach to narrowing down the potential alignments for this pedestrian and bicycle bridge. As Mark mentioned, we started about a year ago, a couple months into the project process after that purpose and needs statement was developed. We initially had 7 different alignments, we called them at the time. Those 7 alignments then evolved or morphed into 15 different alignments, which was influenced by comments received from the PMT, the PAC, the PLT, those stakeholder interviews conducted to date, the focus group meetings, the tribal consultation, and the public comment. Those 15 alignments were then analyzed in detail through our technical analysis, looking at impacts to the shorelines, connectivity to the bridge heads, level of traffic stress experienced for people walking and biking to access the bridge, and even built a travel demand model estimating trips based on the given alignment across the river. From the 15, we narrowed down to what we called the 5 most promising alignments, and eventually where the concept plan ended was shifting the narrative from alignments to 2 corridors. So rather than thinking of a line on a map, a larger silhouette of a corridor, and we have an upstream and a downstream corridor, which were the ultimate recommendations of the concept plan. And here are those preferred recommendations, that upstream and downstream corridor. The downstream corridor that you see on the left side of your screen connects roughly the area of 10th Street in Oregon City to the existing I-205 on-ramp, or as shown in the rendering here, and as you heard about on Tuesday, the future planned roundabouts. The upstream alignment connects in the vicinity of 4th Street in Oregon City, or sometimes referred to as the Highway 99 elbow, and it connects across the Willamette River to the area of Mill Street, which is also planned for a future realignment of Willamette Falls Drive. which you had also heard about on Tuesday night. So now a bit of a comparison of the benefits, burdens, and the remaining unknowns between these upstream and downstream alignments. For the upstream alignment leverages planned development. It increases economic access and attraction to downtown Oregon City. It also has the potential for increasing tourism. It supports the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation's vision for reopening the locks, and it provides a lower stress experience compared to the downstream corridor. The downstream corridor provides immediate access to the shared use path along McLaughlin Boulevard today. It is a corridor that is less dependent on future development. It protects the visual experience of the historic arch bridge, that is the view to the falls from the arch bridge, and it better minimizes conflicts of the cultural resources compared to the upstream alignment. For burdens, the upstream corridor, the construction coordination with the Metro Riverwalk project may create an adverse effect to cultural resources. It impedes views of the Willamette Falls and historic arch bridge. It has a higher probability of archaeological impacts and may require more substantial NEPA evaluation. The downstream corridor has a high likelihood of impacts to households on the Westland shoreline, those along Territorial Drive. It's considered to have, may have a loss of economic opportunities to draw people to and through downtown Oregon City. It has limited options of the actual bridge type due to the requirements of a longer span and structure of the bridge. And it may also, of course, have archaeological impacts associated with it. And lastly, the unknowns. A lot of these were discussed and are related to the projects that were discussed on Tuesday night. They are mostly focused around the timing and funding of these other transportation improvement projects in the area. One of the biggest unknowns, and maybe the most important unknown, is the extent and ability to mitigate the cultural and environmental impacts associated with a new bridge. Some additional unknowns include the right-of-way impacts, the potential permits and approvals that would be needed for a new bridge, and of course, the ultimate timing for funding and construction of the bridge. With that, I'm going to pass it back over to Mark to bring us up to speed with where we are today. And I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Mark, you're muted.
Nick, can you just go back to the previous slide really quick?
Sure thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so as we finish this project, as Nick referred to, there's a lot of timing issues. There's a lot of things that are coming into shape on the development side. And then there was just a lot of unknowns, especially in that environmental cultural piece. As the project team looked at that, got continuous feedback, it was to make a determination and say, let's have it at this specific location in this time. It really said, let's look at how we can preserve corridors and continue to move this forward, not lose opportunities, and come back for a future refinement study. And during that, some of these may fall into place and we have better knowledge as we're continuing to get funding and timing through that process. And as a result, the recommendation was to adopt 2 corridors to preserve those corridors and allow the local agencies as well as the regional partners to seek funding and to further a refinement study as time goes on. But again, preserve the corridors and without anything adopted, development could potentially block things off and other impacts could occur. Is listening to both of the councils and the commission. I know on the Westland side, there's been a lot of support, but there's a lot of concern on the downstream scenario, which has a bridge either going over or between houses on Territorial Drive. I know Commissioner Baumgartner and the project team actually kind of canvassed door to door to get feedback, but it's a real concern. And on the Oregon City side, with the upstream scenario, the cultural impacts, the visual concerns, and then just the interaction with the Riverwalk were some themes that we heard from that group. And as a result, trying to say, let's go just upstream or downstream, we just didn't believe we had enough information as a technical team, and hearing from the commissions and councils, and we'll reconfirm or conflict with that tonight, was there wasn't quite enough information to say, let's go with one direction or the other, given the benefits, burdens, and the unknowns that Nick just went through. So with that, I'm going to take 2 more slides and then we'll open it up for some conversation, but want to talk about where this project sits and where the next steps are to bring it to fruition and have a bridge in place. And so we went through project identification, we went through the concept planning, and we're really at the bottom there at the first step of 5 steps that would take this into process. The first being local adoption, because local adoption kind of sets the stage. One, it shows and demonstrates the communities desire this as being part of their transportation system. And if you don't have that, it's very difficult to move on to the next steps of getting funding. And without funding, you can't do environmental review and then select a preferred alternative based on that more deep environmental understanding, and then refine, design, and ultimately construct. So before we get to all of those and even make a decision, there needs to be, hey, this in general makes sense. These corridors make sense. We may not, exactly like one or the other, but we need to find out more information. And through this process, if let's say theoretically the local agency said, yeah, let's go through and adopt it, those 2 corridors would be adopted into the plans with these next 5 steps laid out. And the city council and city commission would come back as part of step 3, once that environmental work has been provided and more time has passed and some of those uncertainties become a little bit more clear, would have another decision. And at that point, in essence, amend your TSPs to say, we're going to go with an upstream corridor or a downstream corridor. And probably at that point also have a very particular of not only is it upstream or downstream, but it's going from point A to point B within plus or minus 10 feet. So a lot more detail goes into that environmental review process, very similar to the environmental review process ODOT went through on the 205 project. A lot of detail, a lot of in-depth piece. But before any of that can be done, it's the local adoption. So those are kind of the 5 steps. The time frame of that obviously starts with this group, but also funding plays a big role into it. So those are the steps to move forward. Next slide, please. So we went through those steps, and we'll focus on step 1 tonight, the transportation system plan adoption. As I mentioned on Tuesday, Westland has went through similar amendments, most recently with the Willamette Falls Drive concept plan, and previously the 43 concept plan, where you did a little bit more detail, adopted into your transportation system plan, and then further refinement and design are take place after that. Many of you that have seen your transportation system plan, there's a lot of lines and future corridors. This is actually taking a little bit more refinement of that, and then we would go into those next 4 steps. Next slide. So if the 2 council and commissions are acceptable to adopting this, what does it accomplish? And there's really 4 primary things that it accomplishes for the 2 communities. The first is it establishes and documents that desire and provides a legal backing that you can preserve those corridors. So if a development came in, you would be able to say, okay, that's great. How would a bridge still be able to be constructed in this corridor in the future? So it provides a little bit of protection, but it also, the first thing in going after any funding is there community support? And that generally means, is this adopted into a plan, thus being the transportation system plan? So that's the first kind of legal element. It also defines the corridors that you want to see evaluated and selected from, and ultimately something constructed in the future. So it's not the 15, but it's now narrowed to those 2 corridors that Nick identified. And if we go through the environmental process and both of those fail for some reason, then you can kind of go back to the starting board, but it gives some guidance of where to focus energies in that environmental and refinement process. The third, which relates back to the first, is it allows us to seek funding and go forward. And right now, obviously, and probably as we're speaking, Congress is looking to vote on infrastructure. And then there's other opportunities. We're starting to hear rumblings of potentially a 2024 regional package in transportation. So this would set the steps to be able to go after local, regional, and federal funding for a project of this magnitude. And then finally, it provides a level of certainty not only to the communities, but also to developers on what the intent is and what they need to plan for and around as you go forward. And certainty for those that have done development or have been on that side, that's golden, because you understand what's going to be coming down the line versus it's an unknown in going forward. So those are the 4 things that would be accomplished through the local adoption. Obviously, still got to get through steps 2 through 5, but this would be what step 1 primarily accomplishes moving forward. Next slide. So as far as federal funding, there's other elements that we could go after, different grants, CMAQ dollars, and so forth. That's in the plan that you've reviewed. There's other state dollars that we could go for. And then, as I mentioned, the regional sources. The refinement study will again continue to look at those benefit burdens and unknowns at that point. And then it would move ourselves into a NEPA process or a non-federal refinement study process, depending who the lead agency is at that time and place going forward. Next slide. So next steps, local adoption. And I think I've relayed this to both Commission and Council. Clackamas County, Metro, and ODOT have all agreed until there's any movement at the local period or level that they would not move forward, assuming the cities adopted this into their plans. There's been verbal commitment that those agencies would then move forward in adopting into, in essence, the Clackamas County Transportation System Plan, the Regional Transportation Plan through Metro, and if need be, ODOT could adopt a facility plan as well. That's still, it's not a necessary thing, but it may be an additional element of the adoption process going forward. But really starts with these 2 groups or stops with these 2 groups going forward from here. So next slide. So wanted to open up to discussion, and I'll turn it back to Mayor Walters, who's chairing tonight. Just a friendly suggestion, maybe Mayor Walters, is to hear from Commissioner McGriff and Councilor Baumgartner as your liaisons to start the discussion, and then I'll be here, Nick and I'll be here along with Sandra to answer any questions to have the discussion. So I think Q&A, thoughts, and then I think at the end of the evening, kind of some guidance to staff of, hey, does this make sense to move these into adoption process, and you're going to have public hearings, and it doesn't mean there's a commitment that both cities will adopt, but should we take the effort and move forward into those adoption processes? So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mayor Walters.
Thank you. Thank you for that great presentation. I was thinking the same thing. I'm really eager to hear from Commissioner McGriff and Councilor Baumgartner, because I know you both have invested a lot of time in this project. So I'm not sure who would like to go first. Councilor Baumgartner, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Mayor Walters, and thank you, Mark, and Nick, both for the information and continuing to give us lots of different things to think about. As we have gone through this process, I've been very interested to listen to any kind of public feedback that we've been able to get. And I have also, as I think it was Mark maybe referenced, gone and spoken to some individual homeowners in the potential landing zone of one of the steps. Generally, the feedback has been positive, and the potential here, I think, is really exciting. As long as we are continuing to consider the different locations and their benefits. So, Commissioner McGriff, did you have something that you maybe wanted to add to that?
I can. I'm more interested the others, but I will add that there were many interesting viewpoints presented through the Project Advisory Committee. I do have some additional questions. The seven, I guess I would like was whether there were, how many of those respondents were from our local communities and how many were from like the bike ped lobby, just to give me a better perspective of where the comments are coming from. While I realize this is would be a facility that would serve a lot more people than just our communities. Right now, I'm kind of focused in on what our community members have to say about it, as sort of just, as Mary said, interested in hearing their perspectives. I also sit on the Downtown Association board, and I know that their perspective is making sure, as I like to call it, we do not miss the red carpet that is Main Street. So I will defer any further comments pending discussion with my fellow commissioners and counselors, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McGriff. Are there any other comments? Councilor Bielostowski.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm home now. I just wanted to ask Councilor Baumgartner and Commissioner McGriff, to the extent that you also went with down to visit the homeowners, Commissioner McGriff. What were people's reaction to the idea of the bridge going potentially over their property? I mean, did they realize that their property might get condemned for that purpose, and were they okay with that? Or because that's one of my big concerns with the downstream. So I just wanted to hear what the reactions were.
Well, I can comment directly on speaking with one of the individuals who they have the home at the very end of the street, so it's the closest to McLean House, actually owns the rest of the lots and their rental houses. So basically, there's one property owner down there, and I think they have a partner who does not live on the street, but is a financial partner. I haven't actually heard the term condemnation or condemning the land, so I don't. That term wasn't used in the conversations. The homeowner, the property owner, was definitely discouraged by the idea because they have quite an amazing view of the river, and their view would be impacted by having a bridge landing, maybe going between or over the top of their home, depending on how it's situated. So I think there would be further conversations if that is the concept that's brought forward.
Council, I have not personally talked to any of the folks who live along there, although as many of you are aware, I do walk that portion quite regularly, and I have stood away from the homes in the open area closest to the I-205 bridge to look at, view corridors across and on both sides. So again, I wasn't aware that there was just one property owner, which actually makes me happy because then we're not dealing with 4 people, but and I understand the others are rentals. So I don't personally have any experience. But obviously, if I saw somebody outside with them, but I don't generally see people when I'm out in that particular area.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
to
Go ahead,
make-
Counselor.
Sorry, just to make one clarification. I realized as I need to correct myself, there is one property owner and at the very end, and the lot immediately west of his lot is a separate owner. And those 2 houses, I believe, are where the landing would be, somewhere in the vicinity of their 2 homes. So there's 2 separate people. It's just that the one at the end owns all the rest of them. He doesn't own the one right next to him. So just for clarification, there's 2 separate individual property owners down there.
So I guess I would have a question for Mark is how do you build a bridge over existing homes? How do you mitigate for that?
Yeah, there's two ways to do it. One, if you can purchase aerial rights and actually construct the bridge physically over that. That doesn't happen as often, but it is a way that you basically do that, and they sign waivers because of something may happen or something falls off the bridge. That's done sometimes. Other times you're able to get an easement between the houses and build it so it's not immediately over. As Commissioner Baumgartner, these houses are fairly close. You could get a bridge, but up. And when we say the bridge in this location is probably going to be 80 to 80 plus feet up in the air. So it's, significantly above the rough lines of these homes. But you could theoretically have it where it comes between houses and then you have an easement right to that. And then the third, which was referred to, is by condemnation or a willing seller as you buy the home and either take it down, keep it, and then sell the aerial rights through it. So those would be the 3 methods that you would potentially utilize to do the downstream corridor.
Okay, thank you. And how wide is this bridge going to be? I'm looking at the corridors, and of course they're huge, but I'm looking at, versus the arch bridge. Is it about as wide as the arch bridge?
It wouldn't be quite as wide. We planned a 24-foot wide structure, and that would give room, if you wanted to stripe bike lanes and then a separate kind of multi-use walkway. Also, it would provide for, emergency, because it would be structural for emergency services. So if you had to bring an ambulance over or something like that. So 24 feet, if you think about, that's kind of roughly the curb to curb width of the arch bridge. So it'd be probably about 10 feet narrower than the current arch bridge, and a lot skinnier structure because it would likely be of some sort of steel type of construction.
Okay, that's good information. Are there any other questions from other councilors and commissioners? Everybody's quiet tonight. Oh, Councilor Jones is here. Hi, Councilor Jones. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment. I did have one more question, which was, oh, I'm sorry. Well, let me just ask my question really quickly, and then I'll go to you, Mayor. I apologize. Who is responsible for constructing like the access and the egress of these bridges. So, the whole point is connectivity, but if we ride our bike across and we end up on 99E in its current state, it's not, it's not really going to be enjoyable for people with kids and little bikes. So how is it going to connect to current pathways, and who's responsible for building that infrastructure?
Yeah, so two good questions. As far as the detail of how it specifically connects, we know as we kind of went through the detail is there's a vertical element of tying in. Definitely the Westland side is higher, so tying in and either through a system of ramps or direct connections, we need to make sure we have a vertical tie-in. But the idea was on the Willamette Falls or the Westland side to tie in somewhere between the two roundabouts and the multi-use path that's along 43. So you'd be able to access that and then continue up 43 or come across and then go down Willamette Falls Drive. On the Oregon City side, it would be connecting into the existing multi-use path in that area, and then likely allowing access in the vicinity of the existing signal and going up Singer Hill. That was kind of a concept. Again, that could be shifted up or downstream a little bit there. And then at 4th Street or the Upstream, tying in directly to the Metro Riverwalk, kind of at the same grade. And then vertically either connecting through Moores Island or connecting directly to the Westland bank, and then tying into the Willamette Falls Drive multi-use and cycle path on that side. So the specific alignment isn't detailed out and wouldn't be detailed out at this level. As far as the construction and responsibility of that, the partners agreed. So the partners, again, Metro, ODOT, Clackamas County, and the two cities, that determination would be done following adoption and then in the seeking of funding. And as funding is sought, that determination would be made. I think the size and magnitude and type of project lends itself to agencies that may be more set up to do that type of project, but any one of the 5 could theoretically be the construction lead and maintenance lead. But I think the partners on the leadership team agreed that let's get to that once we get agreement that bridges make sense, as then work through that as we work through the funding of who would be the lead, and then ultimate responsibility or co-responsibility for bridge maintenance and construction in the long run.
Thank you. Mayor Lyle Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. So in general, I love the idea. I think our communities need a safer crossing, and there is a long distance between this area and bridges to the north and the south. So, and I only think it would enhance the future plans of what we would like to see our downtowns and our downtown and the Willamette Falls and the Willamette Falls area on the Westland side of the river, really come to pass. So, I think we have to remember that this is just a concept plan. This could be 20 years from now before it ever even gets built. So I hope nobody's like panicking over trying to come up with construction costs or anything like that. I mean, we're really so far from that, but you do have to start. You do have to take baby steps, and I kind of consider this as a good step one. And I feel like there was a lot of great outreach and input in order to get us to this level. And I know that any of the future steps will require a lot of input and tons and tons of more public engagement. So I really support this because I have been across the Arch Bridge walking and on bike and with cars, and it just it isn't a great bridge to meet all of the needs that we need if we're really trying to be visionary for all of our cities. So with all that, I do have one question. This is probably more for Mark or Nick. the timeline that you showed really showed a very linear path, and it showed project funding or finding funding or identifying funding really as I think like the next step or really early in that. In my viewpoint, I feel like a lot of times for a lot of our projects, we've been able to find funding for a lot of the preliminary design or the environmental review pieces, and we haven't, the funding piece has come in phases. And so my question is about this chart. I mean, are you thinking that truly is linear like that? Or is what I'm describing maybe more of a reality where we could get some funding for design, maybe even preliminary design, or up to, 60% design, and work on some of the environmental review and, refinement of the alternatives and go through a lot of that. And then maybe work on the construction funding at a later time.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Mayor. These usually happen in two different ways. The first is getting funding to really support steps 1 or 2 and 3 of that environmental review, because that's not a cheap endeavor. And then generally, once that's settled and you have a NEPA document and a preferred alignment, then going after the funding for the specific bridge, because depending on the bridge type, there can be a range of costs there. So that is generally a kind of a two-step funding to get the first, and then coming back to get funding after that. There are federal grants and a few that you would get all the funding, but it would be kind of a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 2 would be based on the success of phase 1. So you could get let's say a $30 million grant, but there's 2 million, 3 million for environmental review, and the other 25 million is contingent on success of phase 1. There's a few projects that go that route, but you're generally right. It's going to be funding, do some more work, and then funding again.
Okay, thanks. I just kind of wanted to flesh that out a little bit, because some folks may see that funding identified and feel like that's kind of a showstopper right out of the gate of, especially when you don't even have a preferred alignment. I mean, who knows what the costs are going to be, 15 years from now, and for whatever alignment, if we're going to pick. So that was all I had. Thanks.
Excellent points. Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor Walters, and thank you for the presentation. I'm just a little curious about the survey methodology. I was a little stunned that there was not more information about the methodology. All you said was that there were 780 respondents and you gave their demographics, but that doesn't really tell me much about the reliability of this survey. And so I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about what that was like.
Yeah, so this survey was more of a general public process. So notifying both the area at large. There was newspaper articles, newsletters that went out, and that's how it was solicited. And then we looked down at the breakdown of what came back. So unlike a polling firm that would go out and do a certain number of calls, it's more responsive based, so not as scientifically driven from that standpoint. We do know from the respondents and location, we got roughly, and I'm trying to pull up the numbers, but about 40% was from Westland, 45% I believe was from
Looks like Mark may have froze. 45% from Oregon City, I believe, is what he was trying to say there. And then also to provide a bit more context, we did have a specific group on the project team, a group called We All Rise, whose focus is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They provided what they called a equity progress report throughout the project and public process to guide along the consultant team on specifically the outreach that was being made and that should be adjusted to better accommodate people who may have not been brought to the table or may have not been engaged. Those were specific around, again, those focus groups that I spoke to earlier with youth, seniors, etc. So hopefully that answers at least part of your question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I realize that there are only limited resources to do a survey rather than a poll. But my issue with using survey data is that when you're asking people to come to you, I don't think that's giving us a very full picture for us to create good decisions here. And so when you're saying that 80% of the respondents were in favor of it, I don't really take that seriously. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I will add to Commissioner Marl's comments. I felt that way about the entire process and felt that way about a lot of the surveys. The surveys and the data can show exactly what you want us to see and not exactly everything that we need to see. I am not opposed at all to the concept of a pedestrian and bicycle bridge. I think, but if you ask people, hey, do you want a pedestrian bridge? Sure. Do you want to pay for it? No. That's two different questions. So yeah, people want a bridge. I would want a lot of things, but are we going to pay for it? Probably not. Are citizens going to want to pay for it? Probably not. Maybe in the future, maybe sooner than later. I'm not sure. So I am open to this idea. I understand that, this is the first step in the process. So I'm not I would be fairly supportive of moving forward in this conceptual base. The problem is I don't think it's a priority for Oregon City right now. It could be 5 years from now, it could be 10 years from now, so I don't have a problem getting in that process. But there are a lot of projects that I feel in terms of the priority of our city right now that far outweigh this. In terms of the two corridors, I have great concerns about the upstream. No, I actually have concerns about the downstream corridor. I have concerns about both corridors, but I more prefer the upstream corridor. I prefer the upstream corridor, both partly because of the concerns that were already talked about in terms of property ownership and all of that. But I also think it fits much more strongly in the visions that we have for both sides of the river and its future use in terms of tourism and connectivity. I do have, concerns about the cultural impacts and tribal impacts that it has. So I guess I'm open to this idea of kind of putting a placeholder in there and saying that we support it as a city. I think, though, if that comes with any sort of financial commitment from the city, I wouldn't support it because I don't think we have that, and I don't think we are there yet. And there's so many other priorities. I'm thinking of other things that I would be even much more interested in talking about in Oregon City, such as the frog ferry concept and other connectivity and transportation issues that I think we need to think about on our side of the river in terms of shuttles and parking structures and those kind of things, which we've talked about far more than that. And I think in time, a pedestrian bridge would be a great addition to that. The problem is right now is, especially in the downstream corridor, we're building a bridge to nowhere. There's nowhere to go there yet. Our trail system is not fully built out. We didn't even mention in our city's presentation several big pieces of our waterfront concept, which I'm surprised we missed talking about, like the master plan for Clackamas Park, the Cove development, and all these other things that we're working on. So we right now don't have a full trail system that connects the Cove to the Willamette Falls site that really is safe for bicyclists and pedestrians. And eventually we want that to go essentially from the Cove all the way to Kenema. Once we have that, a connection across the river would be ideal and amazing, but it's going to take us some time to get there. So I have no problem with supporting this going forward as in a general concept. I'm going to be leery of any financial commitment. But if we can go forward and find support in the region and other places, then I'm open to it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Jules. Good evening, everyone. I've actually got 3 questions. I don't need to ask all 3. I can ask one and then just keep cycling back if you like. I think they're pretty straightforward questions, though. And forgive me, I don't know who they're being directed at, so whoever wants to respond, thanks. The first one is, what's the genesis of this concept? You know, I've read all kinds about it, but I don't actually know who or what it started with. Who brought this up in the first place? And if this is a question you already answered tonight, because I arrived late, then tell me that, and you can move on without answering, and I'll find out the answer later. That's the first question. Thanks.
Great. Councillor Jones, this is Mark Vitoric. Pleasure to see you again. The genesis of this, really the 5 partner agencies, so City of Westland, City of Oregon City, Clackamas County, Metro, and ODOT, saw a need, and as earlier in the presentation, a lot of those investments in multimodal infrastructure between Willamette Falls Drive, Highway 43, the Riverwalk, the extension of the multi-use path, and so forth. They saw a need of how do you get across? And there's always been, you know, could we do something with 205? And through that process, it was determined that really wasn't a feasible option. So ODOT had some money in their biennium budget that just ended and said, hey, we want to help invest with this. Metro saw their region from a regional standpoint for bicyclists, especially, but also pedestrians. This was a gap. We have basically over a 15-mile section of the Willamette that doesn't have a sufficient and safe pedestrian crossing. And Clackamas County, as they've done their transportation system plans, saw a gap. So between all 5 communities, they partnered almost 2 years ago and said, hey, let's look at this and try to move something down the path and see what's feasible and what could be done. And as a result, the concept plan was developed that would then lead us to, you know, is that something that we want to adopt into our more formal comprehensive plans? And as Commissioner Smith said, just like all the other lines in your plans, they are there when they get funded and when they occur, but it's kind of outlining and saying this is something we eventually want to see in our communities, be it next year or 20 years or 30 years from our standpoint. So that was the genesis of the 5 partner agencies, kind of seeing a major gap and deficiency and trying to identify potential solutions for it.
Thanks. Jules, just a quick follow-up to that one, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
There must be a particular individual that, for lack of a better term, I'll say they're the champion. Who was the light bulb? Who did this come from? And if you don't know and don't want to say, that's fine, but I don't think 5 agencies just said simultaneously, hey, let's do something. I'm curious to know where this started.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if Sandra may have an answer to that. Or any of the staffs or city managers at Westland or Oregon City. I do not know of a individual that spearheaded this from the very beginning.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I don't know the individual either, but when I received the history of this project, when I took on the responsibility of project manager, I did learn that we have a guest here with me. We did learn that on the on the policymakers ride, that does involved the city, county, metro, and some of the representatives in attendance. They rode over the arch bridge, and that was something that was a conversation and identifying that need. So I wasn't there to be part of the conversation, but that was a major component.
Thank you. It sounds like we're not really certain. It is actually a curiosity to me at some point. If we could circle back and find an answer to that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Jules, I have other questions, but let other people go and we can come back to me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Commissioner O'Donnell.
By and large, I concur with everything that's been said by my fellow commissioners and the curiosity expressed by Commissioner Jones, because we have a project that we're about to try to embark on and we don't even know the origins of it. So that's kind of troublesome. The first thing I'll deal with, and I will say, at some future point in time, I can see this bridge being a worthy addition to both communities. And the key word there is future. I'm going to express the same concerns that Commissioner Marl did. If 45% of the 700 surveyed were Oregon City residents, if you do the math on that with 36,000 residents, that's less than 1% of our total residents were surveyed. And I would feel a lot more comfortable if the thing was more a public referendum. But to do that, you have to analyze costs and what the sources of funding are. So I struggle with the presentation. I watched the review, I reviewed the benefits and the burdens and the unknowns, and I don't find them convincing. And I noted that we skipped over some of them. I'm not sure I even saw a survey of the existing foot traffic across the existing Westland, Oregon City bridge that would tell me that there's a demand for it. And like Commissioner Rocky Smith, I think if we put this out to the public, they would say, hey, we have more immediate needs that we need to take care of these first. This is nice and it would be a nice thing to have, but what are our needs versus our wants? And I'm not sure that we're there. And the other question I've had from the beginning is it's an unfunded project and the sources of funding remain nebulous at best. And I've heard it mentioned mostly in passing about local funding. Again, I agree with Commissioner Smith. I don't see that as succeeding. I think people would think we have other things we need to accomplish first. So I don't really feel there's been a true demonstration of need. It's a demonstration of want, but not need. Again, I'd go back to a public referendum once we've further defined the project. And again, I'm not summarily against it. I just think it's a question of timing. And I think I cannot start down this path until more of the unknowns and the uncertainties become known. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Great points. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I don't know who to direct the question to, but how has the work to date been funded?
Yeah, so
and if that's already been answered, then let it go. Apologies.
Yeah, the work to date has been funded through ODOT funding and SPR dollars and planning dollars from that fund, and then there was local match through staff time from the cities.
Thanks. And then the only other quick question I had, and I think it's simple, but the survey data you've shared with us, does that reflect all questions asked in the survey, or were there other questions asked and we just didn't get that particular information in the presentation tonight? Because the one curiosity I have is whether, and this relates to what Rocky said earlier, whether people simply asked, would you like this conceptually, or did at any point was funding discussed and potential funding, or weighing this against other projects and priorities in the community? So were there other things asked in the survey that we're not seeing?
Yeah, there were other things that were asked. On page 33, the last part of the document, there is a bunch of resource documents, tech memos, public outreach summary, which primarily is the document that contains all that. And those links, I think, are online, but staff can provide those. So you can kind of delve into all the meat and potatoes that went into this. As far as this versus other projects and priorities, I can say with certainty that type of question wasn't asked. It was very much on the needs in this part of the community for bike ped in that standpoint. As you get into, that further refinement study and going forth in that process, you could get into a more scientific type survey. This type of survey on a concept planning is the traditional practice. Obviously, I know there would love to be more detail, but that type of expense and that type of scientific survey wasn't part of this scope, but could be added into the future refinement scope.
Thank you, Mark, very much.
Councilor Bielostowski.
Thank you, Mayor. I see that John Lewis from Oregon City raised his hand. Just want to check in, see if he wanted to comment on something that was just raised. Or is your comment, Mr. Lewis, more general?
Thank you. I did want to respond to the question that arose from Councilor Jones and followed up by Commissioner O'Donnell. So I just got kind of looking back. It was in 2020. A lot of questions were coming up about the ODOT I-205 bridge project, about why we hadn't included, or why there wasn't included a pedestrian option for the bridge project. So I think that might have inspired this planning project. So I see some email from Region 1 Active Transportation staff from ODOT, and I think that started the conversation about ways we could deal with bike and pedestrian crossings across the Willamette River. And I think everybody, that effort kicked off and invited several participants to the table, and that's where it went. So I think it was generated out of the questions about trying to get pedestrian and bike traffic incorporated into the I-205 project. Just wanted to offer that.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bielostowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. This discussion has been awesome. I've enjoyed listening to the points raised by Oregon City commissioners and fellow Westland councilors, and it's been helpful for me. I share 100% Rocky Smith's statements about concerns about the downstream corridor. And I also favor the upstream corridor, even though we're not deciding that tonight, just put it out there on the record. I feel like just with the tourism potential of both of our city's future projects, and with Oregon City, it's more directly ongoing with the Heron property development. And then we see here in the slide, the potential for waterfront development on the Westland side. And I feel like this bridge could be a definite complement to that, to both cities' tourism and future development down the line. And it really excites me to see that. And I can't help but think about that when looking at this and thinking about this project in general. I do share the concerns about the funding. I don't think there'll be a time in the next several years where the city of Westland has millions of dollars to put forward to this bridge. But I'm hopeful that through, I'm encouraged by the fact that the county will put this in their transportation plan. Potentially Metro will adopt it. ODOT might even adopt it or will support it, and has even funded some of this work. So I'm encouraged that through multiple partners, this could get funded someday. And, maybe we put a small stake into it, but we definitely will not have the kind of money required to do the project fully down the line. But this is a great, exciting project and would complement both cities, I think. And I just wanted to share my thoughts and look forward to the future. And I also, last point was that the local adoption proceedings that the cities hold will allow more public comment and more, I don't know if a lot of people were even aware that we were meeting here, because this is usually our fourth week. We don't usually have a meeting, at least on the Westland side, and it was hosted by Oregon City. So we can do some intentional noticing and posting on our website and reaching out to the newspaper and getting more people involved in the actual public hearings. And, I do feel like we need more public comment. I have concerns about the survey methodology. However, I think that can be handled in the local proceedings and also just through word getting out about the project. So I look forward to hearing more from the community and supporting this to get to the local adoption stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Council President Relier.
Yeah, I share everyone's concerns about the origins of the conceptual project and the funding. I also have concerns about the two corridor paths. I'll start with the downstream corridor path. The topography and the roadway constraints and the proximity for anybody being able to even access that area as a pedestrian or bicycle path without significant improvements to OR 43, as well as to Willamette Falls Drive. I don't know much about the Oregon City side. I know that Highway 99 passes there, and I'm not sure how many people feel that it's safe to use Highway 99 as a pedestrian or bicycle path. So there's a need for a lot of different information than what we've seen tonight on the table before I could even fathom the idea of that being a potential source for a pedestrian or a bicycle bridge. On the upstream corridor, with all the work underway with the new property owners and not knowing if they have been engaged or not in this concept plan and what their thoughts are about us barging in on their project and saying we're going to put a bridge here and make room for us because here we come. I think that's a rather rude approach, and I don't foresee that being a immediate option either. In fact, the only option that I see is using a sister bridge concept for the existing Oregon Bridge and widening that bridge for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. But that would also require us to do quite a bit of work along OR 43, Willamette Falls Drive, and then on the Oregon City side, figuring how they would incorporate that with the businesses that they have, that bridge leads right into. I think we experience a lot of traffic. I personally travel almost every day down West A Street to Willamette Falls Drive, and the amount of traffic that comes across the Oregon City Bridge onto OR 43, either to get on to 215 or to switch over onto Willamette Falls Drive, is horrendous. And it won't be until after all the other projects that are underway with the traffic circles and the Abernathy Bridge and all those other projects and the Blue Heron property all come to fruition that we really even know what this new area is going to look like. And so I think this plan is great to think of as a concept, but I think it's premature. And I think by the time we get to the point where we actually are in a design mode, the whole area will have changed significantly. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Council President. Councillor Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mayor. And I really appreciate hearing everyone's input. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask, I know that there was extensive outreach to the tribal partners, not only the property owners, but tribes who don't hold official property in that ending area of the Upstream Corridor. Could someone let me know what their final disposition was on having a landing in the Upstream Corridor on either side?
Yeah, great question, Councilor Baumgartner. There was mixed. There was, I think, early on, there was a lot of concern with the upstream corridor just because of its proximity to the falls. As more environmental work was going on with the tribal groups, they were doing some other environmental work, not specifically with this project. There are cultural areas both in the downstream corridor and the upstream corridor. So I'd say from the feedback that we got formally, it was neutral, a few supportive upstream, a few supportive downstream. So there wasn't a conclusive one. Grand Ron did submit a letter formally supporting the upstream one from that standpoint. And just to kind of build on that, back to Councilor Ariela's comments, Grand Ron, PGE, and Belgravia. Belgravia is the primary property owner on the Westland side. They were all on the advisory committee, and all those entities supported the plan as has been presented tonight. So that's the background. And the tribes, they, I think, were appreciative that we didn't try to narrow it down to a corridor at this time, and wanted to see further analysis as we go forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McGriff.
I'm going to turn off my video because our Public Works Director said that it's probably not working as well. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me. So I'm going to turn the video off. But I wanted to, hang on just a second. Of course, it's acting crazy at the moment. So I just wanted to sort of respond to a few of the comments just because Mary and I have been through months and months of this. So understand that this has been a very vigorous process, and although some of you have expressed concerns about some of the data, I don't disagree with you, but the tribes were reached out to us, as Mark said. They came and got their comments. PGE was, Arabia was involved. So this is not, so what I really want to say about this is that you have to look at this in a future sense. You can't look at it from a standpoint of how it exists today, because as Bill pointed out, it doesn't work today. Well, that wasn't the point of this process. It was, the point of it was to look in the future as if some of the other concepts and things have taken place. And when those take place, I don't know if this is before, it's how would this work? And I do appreciate the fact that there are two corridors that were considered as the final ones. Now, maybe they're not the final ones, but we went through over 20 down to 15. It kept getting narrowed down as we eliminated processes and eliminated different areas. So it's not like we're picking on one side or the other. It is from a standpoint of what could a future be. So I've been trying to imagine this as if the 99E McLaughlin Boulevard improvements are in, across from the Westland side. I dip down into downtown or into the Heron project. What would that look like? It was asking us to put on our future and look into the future. It wasn't saying we're going to do this today and here's the conditions and that's why it won't work. So I hope you understand that there was considerable study done on this. This was not just thought up for tonight and here's the two options. This has been a very long process, but again, as you've all pointed out, there are still some unanswered questions and we may not be ready to adopt it into our TSPs until we have a little more certainty or we have some more answers to some of the questions that the project team has pointed out to us. And I don't think that that is a bad way to go. So, again, Mary and I can give our perspective in terms of all the work and research and reading that we've done involving this process. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I just want to say thank you to both you and Councilor Baumgartner. I know you've been working very hard in this process for at least 10 months now. So I'm really grateful for you to take the time and do the research and have the conversations that you've been having. So thank you. It's very, very helpful. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark. I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment and want to ask you what next steps are you hoping for from this meeting? How else can we assist you?
Right. So I think both city managers and staff from both communities are looking for some direction collectively tonight on the desire to move forward into some public hearing processes, and understanding kind of the thought process of both communities. The TSP amendments, just to familiarize yourselves with that. It is just adding one more project and one more line on a map into your respective transportation system plans. I haven't done the quick research, but I know both plans have, many projects and tens of millions of dollars. But those provide a vision and they preserve corridors. So if private development comes, there's ability to preserve corridors and allow you to go after future funding. As many of the commissioners cited tonight, it's probably not a near-term thing, and that's fine. You have near-term, mid-term, long-term, and vision plans within your transportation system plan. So really the decision is this something that we want to put in there as a placeholder for some point in the future to act upon? And as part of that, as both city councils go through on annualized basis, is you have usually your capital improvement plan, which is a 3-year or a 5-year, depending on the community, on where you make those prioritizations. You look at the needs at that time, the community sentiment, and what's in your transportation system plan, and you pull those projects out and move forward. There's nothing by adopting this into your plan that forces you to prioritize that as the first thing to do or the last thing to do. So it's really a placeholder and the ability to get some more certainty. There's this project, the funding is complete, the project is complete of the concept plan. The next level of detail is that evaluation, reevaluation, and environmental piece, which is a more expensive piece. And really to do that, I think the partners are looking at some commitment that, hey, there's a desire to look at this, before we go spend another $1 million or $2 getting into those finer details, that there's some commitment that there's interest in this. And then when that goes forward, that could go forward next year. It could go forward 10 years or 20 years from now. But this, again, is really just a placeholder in your plan. So I think what we're looking for, but really what the staff is looking for, is does the commission and the council see a worthwhile movement of moving forward into that? Maybe I'll turn it over to the respective city managers to add on to that. But we're looking for guidance if we want to start down that road to local adoption.
Okay, and to clarify, do you want that direction given jointly tonight, or would you like us to go back to our respective chambers and direct our own staffs?
It's up to you. There's no formal guidance. Joint meetings like this are really to share information, understand perspectives, and then make decisions from that. If you were comfortable, the 10 of you tonight saying, yeah, hey, let's go forward. Or if you want to take time, that would be up to you. And I'd look to your city managers for some guidance on that.
Okay, so maybe first, Jerry, can you give us some guidance on the Westland side?
I think it might be, we're happy to take direction tonight, but I think it might be best if we regroup a little bit as a staff and maybe come back to council in a future session to discuss this a little bit further. I know over the past couple of days, we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of transportation items, and I think all of these things work together. They're all part of one big picture, and I feel more comfortable doing that. And Eric, if Eric was a little bit late, but if you want to add anything, Eric, please do. If not, I'll happily defer to Tony as well.
I concur. I think it'd probably be more appropriate to bring this back to each agency's council and commission for their own discussion and determination on how best to move forward.
Okay, excellent. So are there any closing thoughts then as we prepare to go back to our own chambers and consider this matter further? Commissioner McGriff.
I just want to say that I have long been a proponent of our two jurisdictions getting together, and I am hoping that this is not the first and last time that we do this. I think we have many, many common interests, including the fact that we both own the water system for our respective communities. So I think that that is an excellent jumping off point to have discussions. And I think there are other issues besides this, but I would, after we've talked amongst ourselves, I would love to find a time that we can get back together to talk about this issue, because I think that communication between ourselves will help better inform our decision-making on areas of our communities that affect both of us. And since I am a resident of and a regular shopper in Westland, I have an interest, I think, in both sides. And as I said before, Ray Walker Bridge and McLean House and all the stuff on our side and your side. So I think that we naturally ground for discussion. And I think that I'm hoping that my fellow commissioners and counselors agree that we can do this maybe on a quarterly basis or as issues come up. But I really want to support us continuing.
Yes, I could not agree more. I'm so glad you said that, Commissioner. And I have really enjoyed working with everyone on your commission. I think our cities are natural partners. We're neighbors. We have a lot of huge projects coming up that we need to be collaborating together on. And so I would welcome further meetings, joint meetings. And plus, I just like everybody. You guys are great. So Councilor Bielostowski.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to agree with that. The other day during that long work session with a lot of different information thrown at us, I suggested working together on traffic issues because I feel like we're so interconnected with, as we see on the screen. I mean, there's that bridge and the traffic on both sides really affects both cities equally, I think. So going forward, I'd support that. And I also just wanted to give a quick shout out to Commissioner Marl. This is a pretty special meeting for me because he and I are both 21 years old and we're both the youngest elected officials in the area. And I just, I'm proud of him, and it's great to be on a call with you, man. And it's great that we've become good friends, having had a beer and stuff like that. So just want to say that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate what Councilor McGriff, what Denise said about the fact that both cities have managed their own public water systems. I want to cordially invite the city of Oregon City to help us pay for our new $10 million pipe under the I-205 bridge. So thank you.
I believe we already had that discussion.
Councilor Roy, we're all 21. We're all there. We're just getting there. But we're 21 too.
Oh, too funny. Councilor Jones, do you have another comment? Okay. Anyone else have a final comment? Okay, if not, I would just like to thank the commission and my council and all of the staff and everyone on this call. As I said the other night, I know a tremendous amount of work goes on behind the scenes to get these presentations together. So thank you for spending so much time in keeping us and the public educated on the plans and concepts that are coming down the pike. I really appreciate it. So if there's no other business for this evening, we're adjourned at 7:37 p.m. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.